Hello and welcome to our weekly spotlight. Well, what a week it's been. Since last Friday, we've witnessed assassinations all the way to the horrific events that happened in the Olympics. Just insane. But first, I just want to focus on the terror attack by Hezbollah in Israel last Saturday. And as I do that, I just want to premise this with a Bible verse that I actually read a few weeks ago, but I feel like it's more important now than it was back then. And this is Proverbs 6, verses 16 to 17. There are 6 things which the Lord hates, yes, 7 which are an abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood. And this is the aspect that I want to focus on, because this is exactly what Hezbollah did last Saturday. A rocket fired from Lebanon and hit a football field in Majal Shams, which is situated in the northern border of the Golan Heights. And this horrific attack killed at least 12 Druze children and wounded dozens more. These young victims were aged 10 to 20 and were unable to flee despite a short warning of the siren, and they just could not make it to the bunker. But medics declared 10 victims dead at the scene and 2 died in hospitals. Now, the Druze people who are, they're a slightly different sect of Muslim, but they have been mourning this all week. But this attack just demonstrates how the surrounding nations of Israel behave. They claim to be persecuted, but they fire thousands of rockets into Israel while the media conveniently refuses to report on it. And then when they kill 12 children, they just hide away. But what I would say is more upsetting than even that is the behaviour of the church, especially in the UK. We are just so willing to stay silent when horrific acts like this are occurring. As a body, we are taught in Scripture that God has clearly not finished with the Jewish people. Romans 11, verses 1 to 2, Paul writes, "I say then, has God cast away his people? Certainly not. For I am also an Israelite of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. God has not cast away his people whom he foreknew." As churches, we must actively speak out against this high level of evil against the Jewish people. And as a matter of fact, just all evil, we should be speaking out against it. We need to be talking about these issues in our churches, and leaders should be equipping the body to spread the truth. We should be horrified by the things that we are seeing, but the church as a majority is willfully ignoring it. My director actually sent a video to me with an interview from a pastor named Chris Wickland, and it was an absolute breath of fresh air because a pastor was actually spreading the truth and talking what we as sound believers are all thinking. Here's a snip from that interview.
This is exactly where we're at now, and I do believe the church is at a Bonhoeffer moment again. You know, as we heard from that short clip, that how he went around visiting 15 to 18,000 different churches and speaking to them, and only 3,000 churches agreed with him. And I'm seeing the same thing again. I went, after the October the 7th massacre, I went to dinner with a Messianic Jewish friend of mine, and he wrote a book called The Jewish Jesus. And he was basically saying he was really deeply saddened, dumbstruck, and even angry at the churches. He said, you know, before October the 7th, churches were quite warming up to the whole Israel thing. Some weren't, but, you know, he was always invited to talk about it, and they were all very friendly to him. He said, but after October the 7th, he said the churches just went completely silent, completely dead. And this is exactly the same thing that happened in 1930. See, Bonhoeffer was saying to them, look, this is a potential problem that we've got coming in our nation. They were like, well, we don't want to get politically involved because, you know, we're the church, so we don't want to get involved in politics. And that's exactly the same narrative that's coming out today. Churches are like, well, we don't want to get involved because politically, you know, we're a church. We don't want to get involved in politics. And it's like, okay, let's just wind this back a bit. if we look at what actually happened on October the 7th, and if people actually saw the footage that I saw and that you've seen and others have seen, they would know that this goes way beyond politics. And this goes beyond whether you're replacement in your theology. This is actually a moral compass issue of what is evil and what is good. So yeah, if it means you have to get political to stand up for good against evil, then you get political. Absolutely. If it means you have to stand up theologically on an opinion that's not popular because that's good and it's not evil, then we have to stand up for good and fight against evil. But at the moment, the church, for the most part, is sitting by doing nothing, just as like she's done with the whole other agendas through the liberal things that have come out with, whether it's to do with climate change, or gender ideology and things. The church has remained silent and therefore in some respects has become complicit.
To watch the full interview, I recommend that you head on over to Chris's YouTube channel, and I will leave the link in the description below. But also while you're there, please let us know your thoughts on what is going on in the church. Are pastors speaking out? Are you encouraging them? We'd love to know what your situation is in the comments. But back to the 12 children that were killed in Israel. Initially, Hezbollah claimed and then denied responsibility, but the IDF cleared all that mess up by providing intelligence confirming their involvement. And the IDF identified the Hezbollah commander who directed the attack. So in retaliation, the IDF took out the senior Hezbollah leader, Fuad, who was a very prominent leader in Hezbollah. So a few days later, the Israeli officials were quite quiet on the matter, but Benjamin Netanyahu eventually came out and addressed the people of Israel about what had happened, and he provides very good context, so I thought I would share that clip with you as well.
Of the military chief of general staff of Hamas. I'd like to thank the IDF, the Shin Bet, the Intel Directorate, and the Air Force, and all security branches on very precise execution in 3 different fronts. Muhsan was the person directly in charge of the massacre of our children in Majd al-Shams. He was responsible for the murder of many other Israelis. He was responsible for the incessant attack on our people in the north over the past 9 months of war. He was one of the most wanted terrorists in the world. There was a prize by the U.S. for $5 million, and there's a reason for that prize. He was involved in the murder of 241 American soldiers and 58 French soldiers in Beirut in '83. He was a main element in the connection between Iran and Hezbollah. He was in charge of the entire missile operations of Hezbollah. A few days ago, as I visited that terrible site of massacre in Majd al-Shams, I saw the terrible sorrow and grief of the families. And I said to the Druze, we are brothers and sisters. We have a bond of life. And this bond becomes even stronger in such days of grief. And the murder, the massacre of these innocent children is added to the incessant suffering of the people living in the north of Israel who have been sent to exile from their home, and we will not remain silent over that. We settled the score with Mohsen, and we will settle the score with anyone else who massacres our children, murders our citizens. Anybody who harms our country will die.
So also, just a few days after Shukr was eliminated, Ismail Haniyeh was killed in Iran a few hours after attending the swearing-in ceremony for the country's new president. And many Israelis rejoiced over this, not surprisingly, and given Haniyeh's history of atrocities and militant views against Israel, it's actually worth noting that the BBC said that he was a moderate, but that is to their shame. And I need to remind you, this is the same leader who celebrated the October 7th attacks live on TV. And here's the footage of that.
سجدة الشكر إن شاء الله على هذا النصر. اللهم أتم نصرك وعزك يا رب لشعبنا وأمتنا. الله أكبر.
And not only that, actually, the same individual who gladly will spill the blood of his own people to ensure the destruction of the Jewish people. So, if he is a moderate, I'd hate to look what the extremists look like. So, just for the evidence sake, here's him saying just that.
كما قلت وفي كل مرة أكرر إن دماء الأطفال والنساء والشيوخ لا أقول تستصرخكم بل نحن الذين نحتاج هذه الدماء لكي توقظ فينا روح الثورة لكي توقظ فينا العناد لكي توقظ فينا التحدي والسير إلى الأمام.
We as Christians need to remember the verses that I brought at the beginning, because the Lord does hate hands that shed innocent blood, and he has demonstrated that this week, because he's the one that gives life and takes it away. And these horrible people that have murdered these young children and celebrated over the horrific acts on October the 7th have been dealt with. Now, whether the Lord deals with them now or he deals with people in judgment, he will deal with them. And we can take solace in that. We absolutely need to speak out against it, but we don't need to take revenge on anybody. And there's so much going on in the world right now. And the Bible is clear that sinful nature will increase before Christ returns. But we must remain steadfast in prayer and spreading the gospel. Thank you for joining us for this week's Spotlight. Stay tuned for more updates, and remember to keep Israel in your prayers, stay close to God, and until next time, stay informed. God bless.